My name is Catherine Waymaster.
Thank you. With that, you may go ahead and proceed with your statement this afternoon.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Waymaster, but to two Oxford High School kids, my name is Mom. Excuse me.
Oh, you're fine, man.
Neither of my children were physically injured on that awful day at Oxford High, so you might ask, why am I giving a statement? Well, victims come in many forms. On November 30th, I drove my daughter Danielle to school. My son, Danny's twin brother, Michael, was not feeling well and stayed home sick that day. I then drove to work about a mile down the road. A few hours later, a co-worker ran up to me and asked if I knew what was happening at the school. Her son had jumped out of a window and wanted her to come get him. In just seconds, our phones blew up with social media alerts. There was a shooting reported. I texted my daughter, "Are you okay?" She replied, "Yes, we're in a lockdown." I said, "Stay calm." She said, "We're in a lockdown?" At that moment, she and her teacher thought it was a drill. I said, "Keep your head. Do what your teacher tells you." She simply replied, "I'm scared." I ran out of work and headed to the school. I arrived in minutes before roads were closed and the bulk of the emergency responders had arrived. The radio announced that a shooter was in custody. But of course, no one knew at that point if there was only one. I watched as hundreds of emergency responders arrived. I watched ambulances unload empty stretchers and leave with full ones. I watched as other parents tried to enter the building and be held back by police. I watched a SWAT team suit up in full gear to enter a building where my daughter was still in. My daughter was in a classroom less than 50 feet away from where the shooting began. She was huddled in a corner with her classmates, holding items to use as weapons in case the shooter came in. My daughter chose to arm herself with the star from the top of the classroom Christmas tree to use as a stabbing device. Let that sink in. We continued to text. My daughter was using her Apple Watch because her phone was across the room in a holder along with all the phones of her classmates. It was by the door. Phones were ringing and buzzing like crazy as parents were trying to connect with their kids. My daughter was in that classroom because she wanted to drop off her backpack before she went to the bathroom. She had just left her friends, Phoebe and Eli. They would walk together almost every day at that time. Had she not detoured, had she stayed with her friends, what would have happened? That weighs heavy on her mind. After some time passed, my daughter's classroom was evacuated. I then drove to meet her at the Myers Garden Center. As I rounded the corner of Oxford Road and Bray Road, I saw hundreds of kids heading to the safe place. Some running, many crying, holding on to each other. It's almost indescribable. I then turned into the store's parking lot. Hundreds and hundreds of parents were there. It was chaotic. By the front door of the store was a classroom of special needs kids. When I saw one boy there, the most innocent of innocents, looking around in utter confusion, I knew at that very moment that true evil had come into our lives. What conversation went on in that home that night, I can't even imagine. As for my daughter, it had always been her dream to become a teacher. Anyone who knows her would tell you she would make a great teacher. On November 30th, that dream stopped. The fear of having a student like the defendant scares her. She thought she knew him. They were in many classes together over the years. She saw no evil brewing in him. She's afraid she will not see evil brewing in students she might have as a teacher in the future. To cope, my daughter packs her days from sunup to sundown with activities. Quiet moments with time to think are hard. In the first few months, we would be up talking till 2 a.m, trying desperately to wrap our heads around why this happened. Being in crowds is difficult for her. The thought of living on a college campus frightens her. Loud, unexpected noises are hard to manage. Sitting in traffic is upsetting because there's no clear exit out of it. She struggles with maintaining concentration to complete tasks, and the list of impacts goes on. Excuse me. Although my son was not in school that day, he too has been deeply affected. He thought of the defendant as a friend. They played video games together in school when they had free time in class. The defendant would help him with homework in class. My son trusted him. My son trusted you. Now my son trusts no one. He keeps to a very small group of friends. He was not a fan of school before the shooting, and now every day is a struggle to get him to even show up. He hates being in that building. He dropped out of sports, moved to some online classes because he doesn't want to be on campus any longer than he needs to. He can't wait to be done and graduated this spring. Mike has decent grades. Imagine what he could accomplish if he actually wanted to be there. My son, like a lot of the boys from Oxford, struggle with controlling anger, and his emotions are extreme. Oxford is a small town community, has a small town community feel. It seems that everyone kind of knows everyone. So many notable things have happened to my circle of friends because of these events, and I'd like to share a few. The kids of Oxford School were forced to leave their belongings in school that day. Hundreds of cars remained in the parking lots because the keys were in the backpacks they left behind. One friend's son held vigil over his dead friend's car so no one would mess with it while it was parked there. At a town vigil, a sound system crackled, sent the crowd running in all directions. A co-worker of mine was trampled and broke her collarbone. I found my kids huddled in fear in the basement of an old building. My friend's daughter refused to go anywhere without a support dog by her side. Another friend of mine had 4 kids in the school at the time. She described her home as a minefield because she never knew what kid would break down at any given moment. Another friend's daughter desperately wanted to return to school. She would drive there, but she sat in her car in the parking lot for hours, too afraid to go in the door. Sadly, she was not the only one sitting in the car trying to work up the courage to enter. Another friend's son had given the shooter a friendly "what's up" fist bump as they passed each other in the hallway minutes before the shooting began. He's racked with guilt, wondering if he could have stopped it all. Another friend's daughter-in-law was in her 2nd year of teaching when the shooting happened. She quit her job, and she feels like her whole time in college was a waste, as she will never return to teaching. Every student enrolled at the time now has an asterisk on their school transcripts that denote grades or test scores unavailable due to school shooting. Neighboring communities have been so supportive, but that too comes with problems. Every sporting event, every competition, concert, meet, collaboration, get-together began with soft, thoughtful words and moments of silence. Our students would have to try and perform. It was like, "Hey, your friends are dead. So sad. Play ball." How many scholarships were lost? We'll never know. A rift has emerged in this community over how the school is handling things. It's ugly and it's sad. There is a saying, I hope I don't look like what I've been through. Our kids are desperately trying to act like normal teenagers, yet in the back of their heads, this event taints every moment they try to enjoy. I have a lot of parent friends, and each one of us has one or more children grieving in so many different ways. It's heartbreaking. I feel that each of these kids deserve justice. There were nearly 1,800 students and staff in the building that day, nearly 300 first responders, and hundreds of parents like me all left to pick up the pieces of the defendant's quest for fame. On the count of terrorism, I ask this court to sentence Ethan to the maximum allowed, and I want to thank you for this consideration. After I wrote this statement, my daughter was asked to write an essay at school, and I would like to include the words that she wrote. She had to write a statement of something that changed her mind or changed her perspective. And this is what she wrote. Since I was a little girl, I've always looked up and wanted to be a teacher. I remember playing in my bedroom with a school desk, making my friends be students, pretending to teach them. I can remember asking my sister to buy me a microphone so I could talk into it just the way that teachers did at school. I've always looked up to my teachers and have always wanted to become one. The way they connected with my peers and myself inspired me to pursue teaching as a degree. Unfortunately, a day came when my whole dream changed. On November 30th, a lone gunman and fellow classmate walked into Oxford High School and in just a few violent moments nearly ended my dream. For a long time I felt isolated and not sure if teaching was the right career for me. I felt I was alone and I would never be able to protect students if I was in the teacher's shoes. I started to explore other degrees, but nothing sparked me the way that teaching always has. I soon realized that I could not let the actions of one troubled individual stifle my passion for teaching. I know I will always have uneasy feelings walking in public spaces, such as schools, malls, movie theaters. This event has left a permanent scar on my mind. But since this time, I have found the love for teaching again. I have shadowed many teachers. I feel that if anything is to occur, I would be able to protect those students rather than anyone else. I have now been accepted to OU for elementary education, and I would not change a word. Thank you.